Hello everybody and welcome to another segment of the Butcher Shop. Today we're going to talk about pork butts and what kind of cuts you can get out of those. And just to set the record straight, when I use terms on what these portions of meat are called, I live in the United States, so this is what these cuts of meat are commonly called here in the United States. I know in other countries they might be called something else. Also, in different parts of the country here, these cuts of meat are referred to by different names. So just for the sake of this video and where I'm geographically located, we're going to call this the pork butt. And just so everybody knows, this is not actually a pork's butt. This is a pork's butt, more commonly known as a ham that most people in this region have for Christmas or Easter. But this part of the pig, the pork butt, is actually the chest cavity muscle that the shoulder attaches to. If this was compared to a cow, this would be the chuck of a cow. Okay, now that we got that clarified, let's see what kind of cuts we can get out of this pork butt. Okay, today's video, the pork shoulder butt. Alright, usually in a retail environment, these come either packaged 1 or 2 to a package. This is what most of your grocery stores are going to order in when they go to cut your meat for you. And you'll notice that one side of the pork butt has a bone that protrudes. It's a flat bone. And the other side of the pork butt is boneless. So when you slice these, especially on a bone-in saw, you're going to want to take the bone side and place it up against your saw guide. By adjusting your saw guide to about 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch and taking and slicing your pork butt will give you what's commonly referred to as a pork steak or a pork butt steak. Now, by taking the same exact cut, but increasing your width of your steak to about 1 inch to 1.5 inches, and then taking it and slicing it, we can then turn these into what around this part of the country we call Western ribs. Other parts of the country call them country style. So depending if you're taking it from the pork butt or a pork loin, will determine whether you call it a country style or a Western style rib. Now I've cut this particular pork butt down to just about the end of the bone, leaving a small couple pound pork butt roast left over. Now if you don't have a bone-in saw and you just have a sharp knife, you can take your pork butt and see where the muscle just above the bone is, and if you take your knife and you follow that bone and you basically split that pork butt in half, leaving a little bit of meat on top of the bone still, and just keep following it down until you reach the end of the bone. You can take your finger and you can feel for where that bone ends, and once you find the end of that bone, you can just cut down to your cutting block from there and leave that bottom portion, and I'll show you what you can do then with the top and the bottom portion. Taking the top half of the boneless pork butt, since there's no bone in this half, I'm going to go ahead and trim a little bit of the excess fat off the outside, and once I get that fat trimmed off, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to square it up and I'm going to cut it into about 1.5 inches to 1 3/4 slices, making boneless Western style ribs. Now taking the bottom portion of the pork butt, the one that has the bone in it, I'm going to go ahead and square this up and take a couple more boneless country styles off the side of it. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to trim off some of this excess fat. And that's going to leave me with a nice little bone-in pork butt roast. Then I'm going to grab that pork butt roast that I had left over from the first piece that I cut. I'm going to get rid of the little piece of bone that was left over. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to trim in between the muscles and clean this out a little bit to make it for a nice presentation for the meat case. The scraps I'll set aside and I'll use that for grinding to make sausage. Going back to the original thick cut steaks that I made earlier with the saw, if you split these in two, you can make a boneless Western style rib and a bone-in Western style rib. Since these original cuts were made on the saw, I'm going to go ahead and take a bone scraper and scrape off the bone dust that was left over from the saw. This won't necessarily hurt you, but it could make the meat a bit gritty when you're trying to chew it. So the key is to clean as much of that off as possible after running your saw. And there you have some of the more common cuts that you can get from a pork butt. Your bone-in Western ribs, your boneless Western ribs. Here's a nice pan of Western ribs all ready to go out to the meat case. And we have our pork steaks and our pork butt roasts. Actually, the Western style ribs or country ribs from the pork butt are actually my favorite ribs because they have the fat and the marbling content, which gives it a lot more flavor. Also too, when after they're cooked, they break apart easier, as if you're getting them from the pork loin, which is more solid meat and tend to be a bit drier, whereas Western ribs from the pork butt are more flavorful. If you type Western ribs in the search bar of YouTube here, you can find a lot of great recipes that people have posted. So there you have some of the more common cuts from a pork butt. Your pork butt roast, your Western ribs, your butt steaks, and your boneless Western ribs. If you found this video helpful, click on the subscribe button and then click on the little bell icon to be notified of more uploaded videos. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.